Instructional materials are tools necessary in making the teaching-learning process effective and meaningful for the learners. They help enhance instruction, thereby uplifting the students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. However, teachers experience problems pertaining to lack of appropriate and rich resources of instructional materials, thereby limiting their capacity to provide meaningful learning opportunities. This is a qualitative research which aimed to find out the availability of teaching materials in the kindergarten classes of a public elementary school. It is grounded on the experiential learning theory in using instructional materials through concrete experience. Today, my presentation is about evaluating the kindergarten instructional materials inputs for materials production by Maria Rebecca A. Abayana, Majin B. Plasigob, and Las Johansen B. Caluza. The preschool education requires a stimulating environment that would bring about learning to its optimum level. To provide an effective simulative environment in the process of teaching and learning, many factors such as children's readiness, classroom environment, teaching methods, assessments, and teaching aids make an impact. That's according to Rajapaksha and Chaturika 2015. So it is the prime responsibility of the teachers to deliver the lesson effectively to the students. And it is a common goal for them to ensure that the presentation of the lesson is stimulating, engaging, and motivating for the learners. To reach this goal, teachers need to employ varied and suitable instructional materials that would help meet the individual needs of the learners. For learning to take effect, it is very important also to give consideration on the selection, production, and effective use of these materials by the teachers. In terms of instruction, teachers are provided with compelling platforms for conveying information because they raise the level of interest to learn, and they provide opportunities for private study and reference that stimulate the learner's interest and curiosity towards learning. According to Phyllis and Onditi, 2018, the use of instructional materials helps the teacher to present difficult concepts with ease. So generally, they make teaching and learning easier and less stressful. They are equally indispensable catalysts of social and intellectual development of the learners. For learning to take effect, it is very important that we also have to give consideration on the selection, production, and effective use of these materials by the teacher. According to Wambui, 2013, he stated Piaget's theory that merely using instructional materials does not guarantee effective teaching to make teaching and participation effective. The instructional materials must be appropriately selected and used. Effective use of instructional materials in teaching helps raise the level of interest of the students toward the lesson. According to Agina Obu, he describes the instructional materials as concrete or physical objects which provide sound, visual, or both to the sense organs during teaching. This makes learning more meaningful, and the presentation of the concepts becomes more appealing and interesting for the students. Savory, as mentioned by Onditi, contends that a carefully planned use of instructional materials in lessons should do much to take away boredom and dullness in presenting the lesson. He added that apart from ensuring the learners achieve an in-depth understanding of the lesson, such materials should make the lesson attractive to the learners, thereby drawing their attention and thus motivating them to learn and participate. Instructional materials play various roles in the teaching-learning process. So according to Brown, he summarized the role of teaching aids where as follows. They promote meaningful communication and effective learning. They ensure better retention, thereby making learning more permanent. They help to overcome the limited classroom by making the inaccessible accessible. They provide a common experience upon which late learning can be developed. They stimulate and motivate students to learn, and they encourage participation, especially if students can manipulate materials used. So in the preschool curriculum, the use of instructional materials is indispensable. It draws a huge weight of effective teaching and learning. Teaching basic concepts rely heavily on the use of instructional materials, which make the concepts and ideas more concrete, easy to remember, and more understandable for the young learners. Hence, the preschool materials and instructional aids made available by the teacher. So instructional materials boost teaching and learning as they stimulate thinking and concretize learning. That's according to EIG 2000. The essential aspects of the preschool environment are the presence of the different learning centers which aim to develop and enhance basic skills and competencies suitable for their level. Such characteristics are expected to be observable in a preschool classroom to ensure that effective teaching and learning is achieved. Kindergarten classrooms need to be equipped with developmentally appropriate materials. Toys and materials should be culturally relevant, developmentally appropriate, linked to children's interests, varied toys and activities, and linked to learning goals. Moreover, preschool learning environments have to cater towards creation of common interest areas. That's according to Dodge 2010. So here are the recommended key tools in learning: blocks, toys, games, art, library, discovery, sand and water, music, movement, cooking, and computers. But the teacher's daily concern does not simply call for one's ability to make lesson plans and deliver them well to the class. One important responsibility of the teacher is to provide appropriate and suitable instructional materials that could help aid the teacher in ensuring that the lesson will bring about expected outcomes. One way of doing so by means of producing appropriate and suitable materials for teaching. In the local setting, many classrooms are experiencing lack of instructional materials. A great number of classrooms are not well equipped with the necessary teaching tools, facilities, and equipment to make learning more effective. In some public schools, for instance, teachers complain about the lack of appropriate materials for teaching. In addition to that, due to limited resources, teachers are forced to use inappropriate teaching materials for their lessons. The lack of support and training on the production of effective use of instructional materials for teaching becomes a drawback for the teachers. This somehow affects the performance of teachers and students. There are few studies in the local setting that describe the available instructional materials in the kindergarten classrooms and the problems encountered by teachers in the use of such materials. Moreover, there are very few studies that clearly aim at identifying what particular kinds of instructional materials are needed in the kindergarten classrooms that suits the needs of the teachers in the public school setting. It is on this premise that this study is conducted. This study aims to find out the availability of instructional materials in the kindergarten classrooms of a public school in Tacloban City Division. So they come up with these research questions. Number 1, what instructional materials are available in the kindergarten classroom? Number 2, what other kind of instructional materials are needed in the kindergarten classroom? And number 3, what challenges do the teachers experience in the terms of use of instructional materials in the classroom? So the purpose of such materials is to concretize the abstract ideas presented in the lessons and to make the ideas and concepts vivid to the learners. As the learners interact with the materials, the learners directly associate themselves to the materials, draw from their background of knowledge, and connect them to the material. for the theoretical framework, this theory stipulates that learners learn using instructional materials in steps with the likelihood of developing one mode of learning more than another. So the characteristics of this theory are through concrete experience, observation and reflection, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. So this theory directly relates to the study in the sense that as teachers employ different instructional materials in teaching, students interact with such materials in various activities prepared by the teacher. For the research design, this is a qualitative research study employing the descriptive phenomenology design. Descriptive phenomenology is widely used in social science research as a method to explore and describe the lived experience of individuals. So it specifically focuses in describing the lived experiences of the participants on the availability of kindergarten materials in the classrooms, other needed materials, and the challenges experienced by the kindergarten teachers. For the instruments of the study, these instruments were examined or checked and pre-tested in the preschool classroom of a different institution. It has likewise undergone the scrutiny of research experts, particularly on the area of instructional materials. That's why we have the participants, like all the kindergarten teachers from the target public elementary school, they were selected through purposive sampling technique to draw out pertinent information about the study. The researchers used several instruments for data collection, namely survey questionnaire, interview guide, and checklists to draw pertinent data relative to the study. The researchers sought permission by sending letters to the principals or heads of the school regarding the conduct of the study. The teachers were personally informed by their school heads regarding their participation in the study. In the actual conduct of the interview, the researchers first described the nature and purpose of the research study. A focus group discussion or FGD was administered to the 3 kindergarten teachers. The researchers were guided by the interview guide in terms of asking the right questions to the participants. Permission was sought in recording to the conversations ensure that the interview will be properly documented. After the interview, a short tour around in the different classrooms was done, and pictures were taken to document the different kinds of materials and instructional aids and teaching materials that are available in the classroom. For the reflexivity, the researcher tried to ensure that only the ideas of the participants were the focus of the study and that their experiences as well as the actual utilization of the materials were reflected in the results. For the data analysis, after gathering the data, the researchers analyzed the transcription based of the statements given by the participants in the recorded interview and focus group discussion. The researchers read the transcription several times in order to generate the codes. So according to Colaitzis 1978, distinctive 7-step process provides a rigorous analysis, with each step staying close to the data. The end result is a concise yet all-encompassing description of the phenomenon under study, validated by the participants that created it. So that's according to Morrow, Rodriguez, and King 2015. So here is Colaitzis' descriptive phenomenological method. So for the familiarization of the data, the researchers familiarizes him or herself with the data by reading through all the participant accounts several times. And in identifying significant statements, the researchers identifies all statements in the accounts that are direct relevance to the phenomenon under investigation. In formulating meanings, the researchers identifies meanings relevant to the phenomenon that arise from a careful consideration of the significant statements. And in clustering themes, The researchers clusters the identified meanings into the themes that are common across all accounts. And in the developing and exhaustive description, the researchers writes a full and inclusive description of the phenomenon, incorporating all the themes produced at step 4, which is the clustering themes. In the producing the fundamental structure, the researchers condenses the exhaustive description down to a short, dense statement that captures just those aspects deemed to the essential to the structure of the phenomenon. And in seeking verification of the fundamental structure, the researchers returns the fundamental structure statement to all participants, or sometimes a subsample in larger studies, so to ask whether it captures their experience. He or she may go back and modify earlier steps in the analysis in the light of this feedback. So for the ethical consideration, the researchers follow the appropriate guidelines for the issues such as human rights, compliance with the law, conflict of interest, safety, and health standard, and others. So they sought permission by securing permission from the school's division superintendent and by sending letters to the school heads regarding the conduct of the study. For the research locale, all classes in the preschool level were included to ensure that the data would provide the valid, reliable, and accurate details about the status of available material.
Kindergarten teachers also need the basic, appropriate, and prescribed materials for kindergarten classes in the development of concepts pertaining to develop numeracy skills, gross motor skills, language, vocabulary, and the like. They find them very necessary for effective teaching, especially that they had been taught and trained how to use such materials in the university where they graduated from. For the teachers, the absence of such materials affected in their effectiveness as kindergarten teachers, since they are fully aware of how necessary are those materials to their classes.
For the results and discussions, the available materials in the kindergarten classroom are printed materials. So the most common and most often used materials are the pictures. Pictures are the most commonly used and easy to prepare materials because teachers in the field create a compilation of cut-out and well-mounted pictures that are made available for use in teaching various subject areas. So the said materials are often used and accessed by the teachers since most of the concepts taught by the teachers in the preschool classroom needed picture presentations, and they are grouped according to kind and are kept in individual envelopes for easy storage and retrieval. So the teacher immediate resorts when videos and multimedia are unavailable is to use pictures to concretize the teaching of concepts in class. They likewise keep a number of charts to aid them in teaching. Such charts are oftentimes those that are commercially distributed and sold in bookstores. They are often utilized by the teachers for wall decorations and bulletin board displays. Aside of their colorful and artistic presentations, charts effectively present the concepts with less burden on the part of the teachers. And they also have big books, which are their reading materials with big colorful pictures and prints. So they are often used in story reading activities, where the parts of the story are illustrated in big pictures. So in the kindergarten classroom, the most common materials are those ready-made or commercially made big books. So with the absence of commercially available materials, those available in their classrooms are improvised manipulatives collected by the teachers, such as marbles, soft drink cups, bottles, musical instruments, puppets, and others. Manipulatives are materials that students manipulate in the teaching and development of concepts in the classroom. In the kindergarten classroom, manipulatives are necessary in developing concepts relative to counting, sound production, textures, and the like. So the common instructional materials are printed materials, picture cutouts, charts, ready-made big books, manipulatives, wooden blocks, improvised materials for counting, toys, or playthings. The kindergarten saw the great need to use multimedia materials for an interesting way of presenting concepts in class. For the teachers, the use of multimedia materials enables students to learn best since many sense organs are utilized. Teaching of more difficult and abstract concepts become much easier when aided with such materials. So for the kindergarten teachers, the presence of projectors, speakers, or TV monitors in the classroom could enable them to present more effectively to their students. For teachers, the use of such materials could increase the interest of learners towards the lessons and would increase the students' capacity to learn. The preparation of instructional materials may become challenging for the kindergarten teachers. The absence or lack of instructional materials may incapacitate teachers in delivering lessons effectively and systematically. Absence or lack of teaching materials is a common observation in many kindergarten schools. So, buying such materials may be possible. Teachers could still resort to producing their own materials in order to fit the kind and purpose for which they will be used. The following identified factors were said to hinder them in producing various teaching materials for instruction. So we have the identified factors that serve as challenges for the teachers. These are financial burden, production incapacity, time constraints, and additional workload. The first is financial burden. So a number of teachers admit that making additional teaching materials will cost them to spend much money for the procurement of various materials. They only get a few materials from the school and from private institutions, but those materials that they feel are needed in oftentimes provided by them. Since they handle all the subjects, it entails bigger expenses. Parents likewise do not contribute much for the production of teaching materials, especially that there is a no collection policy in school. In addition to that, they only get very limited materials from the school. Second is the production incapacity. The skills to make such appropriate, effective, and well-made instructional materials such as the big books seem to be very difficult for most of them. The presence of such materials is very much necessary for kindergarten classes in developing language and vocabulary of the pupils. According to them, they lack the necessary knowledge and skills to make their own big books. They lack training in terms of the technicalities and guidelines in making big books. Another difficulty for them is their lack of proficiency in the Wari language. They lack confidence to make such materials since they themselves are not confident with the appropriate terms to use to suit to the mother tongue language. The third is time constraints. Production of materials become difficult on the part of the kindergarten teachers. Since teachers are preoccupied teaching all subjects the whole day with morning and after groups of students, they seem to lack time to prepare for different materials for every subject. So according to them, it is very demanding in terms of the time to be spent for the production of materials alone. They spend so much time in doing paperworks after holding classes for the whole day session, and they lack enough time to plan and prepare materials for all the lesson to be taught the following day. And lastly, the additional workload. Making instructional materials for specific lessons to be taught in class is an additional workload for them. From the preparation of individual plans for all the subjects, the kindergarten teachers are likewise burdened checking all the task sheets for the different activities of the students in all subjects. With the absence of teacher assistants in the classroom, preparing materials for the individual subject gives additional burden for them. And for the conclusion and recommendation, the kindergarten classrooms are not fully equipped with developmentally appropriate materials, specifically those that are very essential for the development of basic knowledge and skills in kindergarten. Production of such materials proves to be a burden for the teachers due to lack of budget, capacity, and production skills. It is hereby recommended that schools prioritize the procurement of essential kindergarten materials and equipment necessary for effective delivery of the lessons. School administrations should likewise include faculty development seminars and trainings to equip their faculty with the knowledge and skills in the production of appropriate instructional materials that are necessary towards creating a high-quality classroom environment.
The role of a teacher in a child's life is crucial. Being a teacher is a great responsibility as the present and future of children are in their hands. What children become is a result of all lessons a child takes from the very beginning. That is why teachers put their 100% commitment in using their talents and strengths in helping the world recognize the supreme importance of meaningful education as a birthright of all human beings. That ends my presentation. Mary Iris Joy, Postrado CATALON, LPT from Dilagalan National High School.